Have you noticed that over time your laptop just seems to move slower and slower? It's becoming less responsive and more frustrating to use? Well, you're not alone, because that's a really common complaint. But the question is, are there things you can do to fix it without having to spend a fortune? We're going to be looking at that next, coming up right now, right here on Tech Talk. Now, the problem of laptops running more slowly over time is definitely one that's very, very common, but the good news is there's 4 reasons why that may be happening that are very inexpensive and relatively easy to fix. And so oftentimes by addressing these 4 things, you can get a laptop that goes from being slow and even borderline useless into one that's useful and actually pretty nice to own. So what are those 4 things that we can look at that might help fix that slow running laptop? Well, the first is cleaning up startup apps and bloatware. Computer manufacturers and software developers, they just love to install all kinds of stuff on our machines. And often that stuff will start running the second you turn your computer on, and it will start running without you even knowing. Now, when that happens, that software runs in the background the whole time you're using your laptop, and that can really slow things down. So getting rid of unnecessary startup applications and bloatware, that's a big one. The second one is defragmenting and optimizing your drives, whether they're hard disk drives or solid state drives. A drive that hasn't been optimized or defragmented will tend to work more slowly than one that's been properly optimized. So that's something we want to do on a fairly regular occasion as well. The third thing that might be slowing down your laptop is you just have a very old drive in it. Old hard drives, the old mechanical drives, they're nowhere near as fast as a modern solid state drive. I've had laptops that are like 10 years old. You take out the old hard drive, you put in a solid state drive, and it goes from being virtually useless to being an awesome little machine. So definitely upgrading to an SSD is something you want to think about if you've got an old running computer that's still using an old hard drive. The fourth thing that might be slowing down your computer is a shortage of random access memory, also known as RAM. It wasn't all that long ago that Windows computers, it was recommended you have 4 gigabytes of RAM, but at some point along the way that recommendation went to 8. And 8 really is kind of the happy spot for office applications, surfing the web, watching videos, all that kind of thing. Anything less than 8 and you're probably running out of RAM and need to upgrade. So those are the 4 things that could really be slowing down your laptop that are reasonably easy fixes. Let's take a look at how we go about repairing those problems. So let's take a look at that first problem that might be slowing down your laptop, and that is all that bloatware that's been installed on it. Now, bloatware is software that isn't really necessary for running the laptop. It's stuff that either the manufacturer of the laptop has installed or that software developers have installed when you've downloaded other programs. The problem with bloatware is it may be stuff that you don't need, that you don't use, but many a time it's loading itself as soon as you start your computer. It's doing that automatically without you asking it. And of course, once it loads, it will run in the background the whole time you're operating your computer. Now, because a laptop is a lower power device, often it's not able to handle all that background activity as well as, say, a desktop can. So it's important that you keep on top of what programs you have that are starting automatically when you start your computer so that you can minimize the amount of background activity you have going on that's using your computer resources. To check which programs are starting up every time you start your computer, the process is really easy. On your keyboard, just press Control, Alt, Delete, those keys in that order, and you'll see this screen. Now we go and select Task Manager. And on the Task Manager, this is the screen that'll come up initially. But if you just scroll down these icons, down to this little image that looks like a speedometer, you'll see it says Startup Apps. If you just click on this, this now gives you a list of every program that starts up when you start up your computer. So laptops in particular are infamous for having manufacturers load up all kinds of software that is analyzing things in the background. Software manufacturers are infamous for wanting their programs to start as soon as you start your computer all the time. And all this stuff can really weigh you down. So if you've got a laptop that's running a little bit slow, a great thing to do is go through this list and make sure that everything that's enabled to start up when your computer starts is something that you really need to have start up when your computer starts. So let's say I don't want Microsoft's Copilot starting up every time I start my computer. All I do is I click on it, so it's highlighted like that, and then I go up here to Disable and hit Disabled. Now you'll notice under the status that is changed from enabled to disabled. So that means Copilot is not going to start automatically every time I start my computer. If I want to use Copilot after I've started up my machine, I simply have to go down here and click the icon in my taskbar, which will then start the program. So by clicking disabled here, it doesn't mean that your program is disappearing, you can't use it. It just means it doesn't fire up and run in the background every time you start your machine. Now, handily, this Startup Apps window also shows you the startup impact. So it gives you kind of an idea of how much resources each application is using when it starts up. So that's a good way to go through and kind of decide, look, if you've got a high resource usage program that you don't really use or don't really want starting up when you start up your computer, you can go ahead and disable it. That's no problem. There's just a couple of caveats here. Some of these applications are necessary for running your computer. If you don't know what something is, you should probably not change the status from enabled to disabled. For instance, this is a dynamic link library. I don't really want to change that because I don't know what it does. Same with security health system tray. That has to do with Microsoft security software. You don't want to turn that off. You want that on when your computer runs. So make sure whatever you're turning off is something that you know you don't really need to have running all the time. And it's a good idea to make sure that that application you know how to turn on again if you happen to need it. Most of the things that you'd be turning off in here, you simply turn on by going to your Start menu and going to All Applications, and you'll find the application in here that you can start again. Now you'll note that on my computer, the startup impact isn't really showing anything. That's because I've just installed Windows 11 on this machine, so that information hasn't really propagated yet. Now, the second problem we've identified that leads to laptop slowness is hard drives that haven't been looked after well, SSDs that haven't been optimized, and hard drives that haven't been defragmented. So let's take a look at how we go about doing that. So checking the status of your hard drives and whether they need some attention is actually really easy. Now, I'm using Windows 11, but it's similar for Windows 10. If you just go down to the search bar here and you type in defrag, then what you'll get as the best match is likely an item that says defragment and optimize drives. Now, if we just click on this, this gives us a great summary of the status of our drives. So you can see here that for my computer, I have two different drives. I have a solid state drive and a hard disk drive. And hard disk drives and solid state drives are treated differently. A solid state drive, because there's no moving parts, it's optimized via a function called trim. And trim should run ideally about every week. Now, because this is a computer that sits on a shelf for me a long time, you can see that my solid state drive, it says it needs optimization. It's been 28 days since the last time trim was run. Now, a hard disk drive is different. A hard disk drive is mechanical, it has spinning platters in it, so it doesn't have a trim function. What it has is a defragmentation function. Now, what defragmenting does is it makes all the files that you have on that mechanical drive lined up nicely so that they can be quickly read. When a drive becomes fragmented, it means that in order to run a program, the computer is having to search all over the drive looking for different parts of that file to make the program run. So to solve these issues, if we look at my solid state drive, ideally this should be happening every week. And you can see down here it says scheduled optimization is on. Drives are being analyzed on a scheduled cadence and optimized as needed weekly. But again, because this PC sits on a shelf all the time, that hasn't happened. So if I wanted to go ahead and optimize my SSD, I just highlight it by clicking on it, and then I hit optimize. And it'll run an optimization program, and now you can see my drive is okay. It's been 0 days since the last retrim. Now, my hard disk drive is similar. If it showed fragmented, even 5, 8, 10, 15%, whatever, if there's fragmentation going on there, you want to optimize that as well. And what it will do is it will defragment the drive. And as you can see, that was very, very quick because I have almost nothing on that drive and it was not fragmented in any significant way. So for a solid state drive, trimming you can pretty much let run on the automatic schedule. Trimming won't make a hugely noticeable difference, I don't think, generally, unless it's been neglected for a very long time. Defragmentation does. If you've got a physical hard drive, because those drives are already slow and because of the way they work, having your files fragmented is really a problem. So this is something you should check. And if your laptop has A physical hard disk drive, when you come to the optimized drive windows, it says that your drive is a hard disk drive. You want to make sure that you keep that fragmentation way down because that will greatly slow down your computer. Now, one thing that's important to keep in mind, if your laptop does have an SSD, in order for that SSD to be optimized, you have to have a little bit of empty space on that drive. It's generally recommended that when an SSD gets to be somewhere between 80 and 90% full, you should really look at getting a new drive that's larger. You need that 10 to 20% empty space for the trim function, the function that optimizes that SSD, to work properly. Now, regardless of how often you optimize your drives, even if it's perfectly optimized, a slow drive is just a slow drive. There's not a lot you can do about that. And defragmenting a hard drive, well, it does help the speed increase. It won't get you to where a solid state drive would get you. And here's my top tip for bringing an older, slower laptop back to life. And that is if you've got a hard disk drive, an old mechanical drive in your laptop, it's really time to get rid of that thing. The fact of it is, I've had laptops that are 10, 12 or more years old that I thought were absolutely useless. They would barely even load Windows. They were so frustrating, it took so long to do anything, I had stopped using them. I took out the whole old hard drive, put in a solid state drive, and it's incredible the difference that it makes. That old hard drive really holds the machine back. Putting in an SSD turns it from a paperweight into a machine that's perfectly useful for those typical applications that we see in an office. You know, you can use Word, Outlook, you can surf the web, you can watch YouTube videos. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with it. It's not slow, it's not frustrating, it's nice and crisp. In fact, I've got a PC behind me. You know, it's a desktop PC. But it is a first generation Intel i5. The first generation. This is an ancient computer. It goes back to like 2009 or 2010 or something. I put an SSD in that and I still use it. It works great. So even though we talked about optimizing hard drives, and yes, it is an important thing to do, and yes, it will help speed up your laptop, if you've still got that old hard disk drive in the mechanical one, you really want to think about upgrading it to an SSD. Now, the fourth problem that we identified that may be slowing down your computer is a shortage of random access memory, or RAM. So how can we tell then if our computer needs to have more memory? Well, a good rule of thumb right now is that Windows really should have about 8 gigs of memory to run well. And that's if you're using standard programs like Office programs, you're surfing the web, you're watching videos, doing emails, maybe some light photo editing. 8 gigs of RAM is kind of the standard. If you're down to 4, that's going to be a little bit light, and it's probably going to be holding things up a little bit. If you want to check, there's an easy way to do that. What you do is you start up some programs. You start using your computer like you normally do. You know, start up some programs. Maybe you got a couple of web browsers open or web pages open, and whatever else you have running typically. Like, just use your computer as normal. And every now and then, as you're working, you can go to the task manager and see what you're using in the way of resources. And the way you do that, again, it's the same as when we looked at our startup programs. You go Control, Alt, and then Delete on your keyboard. You select Task Manager. And then once it comes up, this time you're going to go to this little icon here that says Performance and click on it. And what this shows you is how everything in your computer is being utilized. It shows you, like right now, I'm using 44% of my GPU. It shows you how much of my Wi-Fi network I'm using. Shows you how much of my disk I'm using. And this isn't capacity. This is when you're processing read and write requests. So the important one here is the memory. So you can see here, I'm using 8.2 gigabytes of 15.8 gigabytes that I have available. So I've got 16 gigabytes on this machine, and all I'm running is Windows and a couple of Microsoft Edge browser windows. And you can see I'm already using more than 8 gigabytes of memory. Oh, mind you, I am also running OBS to record this screen. So just having Edge open, having OBS running, I'm using more than 8 gigabytes already. So you can see 8 gigabytes is really kind of the minimum. But this will give you an idea. If you're working on your laptop and it seems kind of slow, you go Control-Alt-Delete, you check out this screen, you can see whether your memory is being capped out, and that's what's slowing you down. Because if you run out of memory, your computer then has to use your hard drive to kind of fake memory. It's called virtual memory. And that's a very slow process, and that will greatly slow down your machine. So that's how you can tell what's causing problems. It could be your CPU, it could be your memory, it could be your GPU, but you can keep an eye on the things that are being maxed out, and it's a very easy way to go about sort of analyzing that. Now, as we've gone through this list, if you've decided that what you really need to do is upgrade your hard drive to a solid state drive, or you've decided to upgrade your RAM, or you're deciding to do both, that does mean you're going to have to open up your laptop. Now, if you've got an older laptop, you might think that's kind of a fun little project, and it is. It's great to tear stuff open and fix things and have the pride of knowing you did it yourself. And the good news is just about every laptop manufacturer, Dell, Asus, Lenovo, HP, they all have repair manuals on their websites usually that help you with the process. It shows you where the screws are, where the connections are, how to get things apart, how to put things back together. The other resource you can try if you have a hard time finding it from the manufacturer is a website called iFixit.com. iFixit sells repair tools for electronics, and they're also huge advocates of being able to repair things yourself, and they have tons of repair manuals on their website. You just might find the one that's applicable for your computer. Now, if you decide you don't want to do that, and I don't blame you because it can be a little daunting tearing into your laptop, you can always take it out to a professional repair person. The reality of it is RAM and solid state drives aren't that expensive anymore. A 500 gigabyte SSD shouldn't cost you more than like $50, and in many cases less than that. So a competent repair person can add an SSD, they can add more RAM, they can transfer over all your files to the new hard drive, and it shouldn't cost you all that much, maybe a few $100s at most. Now that may seem like a lot, but it's still way cheaper than buying yourself a new laptop. Now, if you're into heavy-duty laptop usage, like you're playing games, you're doing content creation, you're really into editing photos, and I mean you're shooting RAW files and doing all kinds of exotic editing, maybe a new laptop is the better way to go. But if you're more of a general user, you're using office applications, you're surfing the web, you're watching videos, you're doing light-duty photo editing, using Paint.net or the Windows built-in photo editor, all that stuff you can easily do on even a 10-year-old computer. You don't need the latest and greatest for that. So maybe you want to take that old laptop and upgrade it, see what you can make out of it. It'll certainly save you a whole lot of money. Now, I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking, hey, does this guy live by his own advice, or is he a guy that just talks a lot? And I don't blame you. So I'm going to introduce you to two of my old laptops. This one is an Asus Transformer T100. It's actually more of a tablet with a keyboard on it. It's a tiny little guy. The build date on this is May of 2014. So this thing is 11 years old. I recycled it by putting Linux on it. So I got rid of Windows. It originally started out with Windows 8. Now I'm using it as a Linux machine. It's a little on the slow side because this was a super cheap tablet when I got it, but Linux breathed new life into it and it still makes it useful. My second old laptop is this Asus. This one has a build date of June 2018, so it's 7 years old. This one has, I think it's a Core i5-8500 CPU in it. It's got an SSD, it's got 8 gigabytes of RAM. This is awesome. I use this for Zoom meetings. I use it for office applications. I use it for editing photos. I do all kinds of stuff on this. I have no problems with this laptop at all. I've got no reason to buy a new one. So I'm a big believer in holding on to old laptops. I think people underestimate their abilities if you're a bit smart about how you upgrade them and how you maintain them. Keep them clean, give them a good SSD, make sure you have enough RAM. They should last a long, long time. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope you got some good tips on how to keep your old laptop going. What about you? What's your oldest working laptop and what are you using it for? I'd be really interested in finding out. Leave those comments down below. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.